all of you. I mean, we might as well go ahead and get started. It is 9 now officially. So thank you for joining us for our secondary analytics work group. Go ahead and go to the next screen. Just in the chat box, share your name, district, role. I know there's just a few of us and we all know each other, but just as regular protocol, we'll go ahead and do that. Heather just dropped the agenda into the chat for everyone. We do want to give you sort of like a small update here. We are going to call this meeting the last one of the year for this work group. There are some things shifting next year. We're going to sort of combine our TKCCC data work group and this systems data and assessment work group as one. And so we do have 4 dates. You know, our official collaborative save the date will go out soon, but you can go ahead and we put these on the agenda also. You can go through and just mark. It will be 9 to 11, and we will send agendas out ahead of time so you know if there's sections that you want to make sure you're part of, and other sections that you would maybe send somebody else to. For instance, like your assessment coordinator, we can you can do that based on us giving you that information ahead of time. So we're trying to make it a little more user-friendly, but still be a space where we can come together and talk about not just looking at data, but how to use it and use it to make decisions back in your districts. So with that, I'll go ahead and pass it to Heather.
So this is just the standard update on basically core. You can go to the next. As you all are familiar with this tracker by now, you can click on that link to see where things stand with your core uploads. I think people are mostly done. There might be a file here or there that still needs to be submitted. I think there's still some assessment files missing for some of you. So if you can get those submitted to share file, we would appreciate it. But you can always check that tracker whenever you'd like to see just sort of where things stand. And we will be asking again for files in August. And there's things up on the dashboard. You can always check out the core dashboard to see what your data is looking like for this year. They've added some new features, so always check that out and see what's up there. Core still has 2 more data collaborative virtual sessions coming up this year. There's one in May and one in June. So we hope you will join those to just sort of learn more about what's happening in core. They always have districts come and kind of share things that they've worked on, not necessarily like core focus, but just, you know, a time to network and collaborate with other districts. So they're always really informative. So we encourage you all to go to those if you're able to, and there's a registration link there.
And this fall will be the first year we get a full sort of dashboard. Is that correct?
So this fall, because we've had essentially a pause on all accountability, but now that assessment is kind of back on the table, now that the state is planning on administering the full gamut of assessments, even the physical fitness test, accountability is back on, but it'll be a little bit different this year. We'll talk a little, I think we talked about it last time. I can address it again in just a slide or two, but it's not going to be your typical standard California dashboard with status and change. It'll mainly be focused on status only. Which brings us to the assessment and accountability updates. I think earlier in the year, a couple of months back, a bunch of new data was released by the state of California on DataQuest and the dashboard. We spoke about it briefly at the last meeting. And while there's no accountability tied to any of these measures, it is nice to kind of see where things are, especially because the last 2 years have been so disruptive. And you know, trying to figure out like what kind of an effect did the pandemic, did our pause in-person schooling for those places that had that, how did that affect absenteeism and several other metrics. The reason we're kind of circling back and talking about it again is we've been able to do some things with some of the data, and we wanted to share some of those things today. But I did want to just kind of reiterate the fact that this coming school year, the dashboard will be limited to status and status only. So the status and change, that 5x5, won't be in play just yet until the following year. College and career, they're going to hold back just a little bit because they do need multiple years for some of those measures. And they're always looking to add and kind of find more ways to allow students to show that they're college and career ready on the indicator. The local indicators continue to be submitted by LEAs, but with the return of status and the California School Dashboard and those accountability measures, that I think that puts a little bit more of an importance on getting those files in at the end of July, beginning of August, so that, you know, whatever preview core can generate for us, because the likelihood is that the California dashboard won't be released until December. Core can give us a preview of that earlier in the school year, a few months in advance, just so that we can start prepping and planning accordingly. Those districts that have kind of been frozen in DA for the last couple of years, there's going to be new lists generated. We'll be able to kind of see how folks are exited from that, if their data shows that it's time to do that. But the big thing that is worth taking a look at that recently was kind of reiterated by the state, you may have already seen the memo, but there is a letter that went out about the participation rate penalty. They actually put this into place like a couple of years ago, but because of the pandemic, it never actually went into effect. Effectively, the U.S. Department of Education they didn't approve of our old penalty, and so a new one was devised. This is just a little snip from the letter, but essentially, if, for example, you're assessing your students, and I think this applies only to the ELA and math smarter balance assessment, so the main element of test. If we don't hit that 95% participation rate, basically what they do is they give standard score. You can kind of see the penalty down there, negative 279 for ELA, negative 247 for math. And you'll, like, let's just say we were 4 kids short of 95%, we'll get that penalty added 4 times until you get to that 95%. And then they kind of calculate your distance from standard, the average distance from standard for the school based on that. The memo, which you can access by clicking this little link here, will give you like a more detailed example, but it's a much stiffer, much more significant penalty than the one that previously existed. So definitely worth keeping an eye on how many students actually participate on both of those exams. I think generally we don't have too much of a problem in our region getting to that 95% rate, but with absences the way they've been, it's well worth minding. And then we talk a little bit about college and career measures. We've been tooling around with this one for a while. We've been wanting to actually figure out better ways to look at college and career measures, because the college and career indicator is so broad and it encompasses so many different things. And generally, like, I think for the schools in our region, and especially those of you guys who have been a part of TK CCC for a while, you know, it's an important thing for us, and it's gotten a lot of attention, and we've worked really hard at finding different ways to provide a broad range of opportunities for our students to show that they are college and career ready. So the interesting thing about it is that there are so many different elements to it. It is not an easy thing to display. And this year, they did put out the measures. What they didn't put out though was how many achieved college and career, how many were approaching and how many did not meet. But that'll be back in the near future. These are the metrics that they did include in this year's data report for all districts and schools in the state. AP exam, for a student got a passing score of 3 or better on 2 AP exams, I believe is the metric there. IB exams, which doesn't necessarily get a lot of play in our area. Completion of a CTE pathway, completion of the A to G requirements, the state seal of illiteracy, like earning that is another way of demonstrating college and career. Completing 1 college credit course or completing 2 college credit courses, those were pulled apart and are 2 separate lines on the data report this year. And then completion of A to G requirements and at least 1 CTE pathway, which is kind of an interesting one. And we've noticed some interesting patterns across different schools. In some places, you see that number being pretty high. And in other places, you kind of see like an either or. So like there's still schools out there, there's still districts out there that kind of see these things as 2 separate pathways, which is kind of interesting. I'll pull up the California dashboard and I will pull up Celia for locals, and they have a lot of students. But if you generally, to get the college and career indicator report, you go into the view additional reports, college and career measures only report, and then when you hit submit, you get this, which is basically a ton of tables that gives you some idea of the breakdown of student groups at that school or district, and then how each of those student groups did on AP, on IB, on CTE, so on and so forth. There is just a ton of information to display, and there is a lot of data there. And tables are useful and they give you all the information, but sometimes it's hard to kind of pull out some of the details. So what we try to do is, like we went through and iterated a lot of different ways, and like this is what we're going to share today. Hopefully it's helpful for you guys to visualize it. But what we've done essentially is taken each one of the college and career measures that are in this report, and we have kind of assigned them to one of these little spokes. Lori says it looks like an eyeball, but if you look on the east looking spoke, you'll see A to G completion, and that will always be there. Here you'll see CTE course completion, like 45 degrees up. You go straight up and down on the 90 degree and you see A to G and CTE completion. Over here you'll see AP exams, IB, state seal of illiteracy, 1 college course and 2 college courses. So a school that's doing exceedingly well on all of these will have a diagram that looks like this gray umbrella looking thing where everything is kind of maxed out. What's more true is that we'll see some variant of like a shape, where if A to G is really high, this number will be really, the dot will come out pretty far. But if CTE completion is low, you'll see the dot kind of come out a little bit lower. In some spots where IB exam, for example, is 0, like there won't be anything that comes out here at all. So you'll see kind of like a shape that kind of cuts back in and cuts back out. And I think I have an example. So in this example, you see A to G completion that's pretty high, AP exams that are very high, but like 2 college courses and IB exams are a little bit lower. State seal of literacy is high. You'll basically see a shape like this. But what is interesting is different campuses have different patterns. And what's even more interesting is, do those patterns hold across all student groups, i.e., when those student groups are participating in the programming at that school, all students perform like the all students group, or are there slightly different patterns for certain groups of students, whether it be broken up by race or by another measure. So we'll show those to you now. We'll give you guys an example. There are links to 4 different versions of it. This is kind of the main example. We did a state report so that you can see how things look for the state as a whole, but you can pull up your individual district just to see like, how did we do? What do our patterns look like, and how do those patterns hold across different groups? You can even pull an individual school, which we did find one little bug that we have to go in and address in these rare instances that there are 2 schools with the exact same name. We're going to have to add another filter. That doesn't affect too many of you, but I know it affects at least 1 school in our area. And then there is a single measure review where, like, let's just say I just wanted to look at like AP exams. It'll show me how things are looking for the whole student group. So basically the main thing looks like this. The all student group will always be in the upper left corner. So this is how all students throughout the state look on the college and career measures. So looking pretty good on A to G, looking pretty good on CTE. Look, 9.9% for A to G plus CTE, a little bit higher on AP exams. IB exams are pretty low, 1% across the state. State syllabi literacy kind of spokes back out, and then 1 college course, 2 college courses. And you can kind of see how those patterns change for different student groups. So you can kind of see that generally across the state, the shape holds, but you'll see some of these things are a little bit longer for certain student groups. For example, AP exams, almost 50% for Asian students across the state, far lower for other racial subgroups. I'll go ahead and show you what this looks like on site. I'll go and pick the district. This is our data set. And if you go to CCI 2021, that'll bring up the state. But it'll also bring down these little menus that show you the district, site, and CCI indicator analysis for 2021. State one looks like this. You can go straight to the dashboard if you want, but you can also pull up and examine the graph that we were looking at a second ago. The last one that says disaggregated by student groups gives you a chance to see non-racial categories. So ELs, socioeconomically disadvantaged, students with disabilities, homeless students, and foster youth students. So again, across the whole state, we generally see the same kind of trends and patterns, but you can kind of see that some of these are a little bit smaller than others. Let's pull up a district. So we start off, actually we're going to get the little square in the bottom, it will fill the screen. Pull up a district. Let's pull up one of our locals. Laura, did you have something?
I was going to say, you could, Elisa asking about how to do it. So I was like, if you don't mind, we could do Workgroup.
Oh, yeah. I can do Workgroup. All right, so if you go to student populations, which is the leftmost button, the second button is just the little radar diagram. It's static. It's basically just where is everything situated. But this button just tells you, okay, you have all your students, 64% of them are socioeconomically disadvantaged, 45% are Hispanic, 25% are Asian, and so on and so forth. This includes all the student groups, and I need to change it so that it actually gives me corporate and not ABC unified. There we go. 92% are socioeconomically disadvantaged, 86.7% are Hispanic, about 10% English learners, and so on and so forth. This will adjust according to whatever district you have selected up in the little yellow box, and the text is pretty small, but I think you can make it a little bit bigger by the Command plus button, however you enlarge the text. But it's good to keep in mind just to see like the general population of a student, of the students in your school or district. Now, there is a little bit of an annoying thing where if I go over here, let's just say I want to disaggregate by race, I will always have to reselect the district. You're trying to figure out how you get it to hold together across these little tabs, and or at least we can't. So here is Corcoran Unified. And so you'll notice that a lot of these student groups kind of go blank. That's because there is either not enough students to report or no students in the data set. But you do here have the all student group pattern diagram for Hispanic students and the diagram for white students. You can kind of see some of the subtle changes and adjustments for each of the groups. Again, the percentage of how big is that population at this site is also kind of included, so that hopefully will make it a little bit more grounded in context. Occasionally, you'll see a student group just kind of doing amazing, and they're like less than 1% of the population. And if you roll over some of these that don't kind of immediately show, you can bring them back. So A to G completion is at 41.7%. A to G completion for white students at 47%, and the average overall percent. But you can kind of see like the college course taking is relatively high. As when you pull up other schools, you'll see that number is much lower other places. CTE course taking also seems to be pretty high. AP exams are a little bit lower. But again, like what are the opportunities that are being afforded to students? Like college course taking seems to be like a big opportunity that it's probably supplanting or overtaking the AP exams because that's guaranteed college credit for a lot of students. If we go by subgroup, and pulling back in, very similar looking patterns. So when we see similar looking patterns, we're kind of interpreting that as like the opportunities that are being afforded to students seem to be uniformly afforded. Anytime you see something like look really, really different, I don't know, it's worth asking the question, like, why are those students participating less or to a lesser degree than the general student population? I can pull up another one.
Any volunteers in the room? Should we pick on someone not here?
Hey.
You can pull up Hanford.
All right, let's get you
We
guys.
got you.
There's plenty of us from Dinuba on the call.
Awesome.
Okay.
All right, so here
Very different.
you see some like a very different shape for like English learners, which is always a really difficult group to address at high schools because of their course taking patterns. That they have required courses that might limit their participation in certain things. You have another interesting shape for students with disabilities, which is another group that can sometimes be a challenge to kind of have participate fully with some of these things. And every once in a while, you'll see the little dot. Generally, it's because it's surrounded by 2 zeros. So like A to G is 0 and CT plus A to G is 0, but CTE is 13%. So like it just doesn't draw the line, but CTE, of course, is at 13%. If I go to disaggregated by racial subgroups, look at what that shape looks like for the various racial groups that attend Hanford District. And again, the percentages are all there. One little note to add, and I might be speaking gibberish for the next couple sentences, but we did these on like a regular scaling, like 0 to 100, every one is equal size. Like these little graphs ended up being super teeny, because on a 0 to 100 scale, 3.6% is a very small area. So we do have these displaying on a logarithmic scale, which basically means like 0 to 1 is magnified compared to like 1 to 10, which is magnified compared to 10 to 100. So you'll see that by the time you get out to like 50%, you are close to the edge. And so that, yeah, this last little bit is the 50 to 100, but there's very little to kind of map there. We just wanted to kind of pull diagrams out as big as we possibly could to make them visually a little bit easier to work with. All right, let me pull up that new button. And some nice big tents. Marty called these tents the other day, and I kind of liked it. But you'll notice that there's a difference for white students. Like the state seal of biliteracy is not something that they're participating in as much. But you do see some participation across students at Vancouver for the state seal. Generally very similar shapes other than that, if we go by student group. Similar shapes, students with disabilities kind of has a slightly different kind of.
So Javier, we don't have homeless or foster because we have percentages that are too small.
Yeah, the percentages are really teeny, 0.8% and 1.2%. And so generally like that data file, if I was to actually open it up, it'd probably be like little stars, like the too small a number to report on without being specific. Like generally you want it to be non-student identifiable, and generally if the number is too low, that's too identifiable and they won't report it out.
She says, I can't select the school when I'm looking at the site. What am I doing wrong?
So when you're looking at, so here, school one? Okay, so this one is the district one. Let me get out. And if I go to the site, it looks almost identical, but instead of picking districts, I can pick schools on this one. So if I did want to pick Corcoran High, now I'm just looking at the high school and not the district as a whole. So usually when you do pull up a district, it'll skew your numbers a little bit because it does incorporate like your continuation school, your alternative ed sites. Those numbers get factored in. If you just wanted to see what things look like for like your specific high school, I would go to the site one. We put them into a separate page just so that
she says I can't even select my district.
Oh, sure. Oh, so we can take a look and see how that's working. I'll stop share.
The box isn't there. Filter, maybe.
Okay.
Okay, let me do co-host, Lisa.
Could you share screen, Lisa, so we can take a look and see what's going on? Okay. All right, so we have, I'm seeing big screen. Go to, we have where you're on the state one. If you go down, actually go to the little, you can either go to the very top where it says CCI 2021 and get the little, not that one, the one on the other end. Left 2021. That's the one. And then Are you looking for district or site? Okay, go ahead and pick CCI district. And now we're looking specifically at the LA. You're on the California one. So the California one is just the state, and it doesn't give you any chance to choose anything. So here you should be able to pick it. So
it is really interesting when you start poking around. Like it's at first it's sort of like, what is this thing? And then you start looking at different, well, at least for us, we were looking at different high schools, different districts, and just starting to see like things that start to arise that maybe people aren't aware, like Javier was mentioning about different student groups kind of engaging in different programming, but also like starts to paint a picture of maybe the things that your district might be focusing on and doing really well in. And that for us, for the regional work that we're doing is really great to bring up in our spaces that we share together, because again, like sharing about how to change some of those numbers, if that becomes a particular focus, like certain districts really, like Javier mentioned, focusing on the dual enrollment piece. Other ones, we're seeing a disconnect between A through G and CTE. So it's like you're either college or career. And obviously as the work that we're doing, we're wanting to make sure like those are one and the same. So again, like we encourage you to look at not only your district, but the surrounding districts and sites, just so that we get in spaces together, we can have some deeper conversations about it.
yeah, there was, I mean, we just were picking random districts throughout the state, and you could really see different, as Lori was mentioning, where folks focused in on as far as college and career goes. She mentioned dual enrollment. That's really big at some campuses. Other campuses have like almost no college course taking. It's all AP, and their A to Gs are really high. So like they have like these kind of like long spiky diagrams. But we've been really kind of I don't know, we've played around with it some, just because some of our local districts have kind of got a more well-rounded tent. There's probably areas that everyone's kind of working on and trying to improve, and obviously there's monies coming for A to G focus and things like that. But in terms of like tagging as many of the bases as possible with dual enrollment, with CTE pathways, there's been quite a bit of work done, and it shows in a diagram like this. I know it's sometimes hard to see just with straight percentages, but anyways, we offer that to you guys. I'm gonna share screen again, just so that I can hopefully, if you are interested sharing these, if you go to there's two ways to get to the site one, to the district one, and to the individual measure one. You go to our TCO data site. Let me just get rid of this. And go to CCI 2021, that will take you to the state one. And the state one is static. It does not change. It is just reporting on the state. To make it full screen, hit this little square. If you scroll down on the state one, you'll see the link to the direct district one, school one, or the measure analysis. But if you come back up to the top, you can get those there as well. Some of these other ones, this is a previous one that I think we shared that Heather put together, comparing two years, the most recent year and the pre-pandemic year, as well as some things for some of our networks, and then an old CCI report that we had done and shared, I believe, last year. But just so for the sake of completeness, I'll kind of show you what this measure analysis looks like. Basically, this one's a much simpler report, but it only looks at one item at a time. I can pick a district. I can pick a CCI category. So if I'm looking, say, at state seal by literacy, which is what's pre-selected, here's how each of the student groups are doing on state seal by literacy that are big enough to report on at that campus. If I wanted to see how things look for CTE pathways, G, So if you just wanted the individual report on one particular measure for college and career indicator, so all groups, you can kind of see that way. So that's useful or interesting. And we're hoping that as the college and career indicator comes back online and some of the measures return that were kind of not reported this year, and the students or the percentage of students that are meeting or approaching, that gets thrown back in the report. Hopefully we see this school.
Javier, just to clarify, so that site is that TCOE data that's maintained by TCOE, but it's collecting data from CalPADS.
So yeah, this data, that site is one that we've had for a little bit, where we've been hoping to kind of move some of our Tableau dashboards. Obviously, if you wanted to, you could get them at our Tableau site as well. But basically what we try to do is just kind of like embed the Tableau dashboard with a little bit of context, a little bit of additional story, but they're all here. The district one, the California one, and the school site one are all there, as well as all the other dashboards that we built over the last couple of years. This particular set is being fed by a state published data file, which you can also grab. I can probably add it to the site so that you guys can download it and play around with it yourself. But they generally every data file that they use to feed data quests, that they use to feed the dashboard, there's generally a site where you can download the raw data file and like so inclined, which we try to be. but yeah.
And all that raw data is being supplied by the districts, correct?
Yes, like all of those files are being supplied from CalPADS. So everything you guys submit to CalPADS feeds those state files, which reminds me that there is, especially on AP, or not on AP, on A to G this year, there was some anomalies in the reporting. I think we mentioned that previously, but if you do find that like the A to G number just doesn't look right to you, you can let the state know. And I think they're adding like a little tag, because I know that there was a couple of campuses that we saw earlier in the year that like their A to G completion rate was like
Absurdly low.
Absurdly low, less than 1%.
Yeah.
And so like clearly like something didn't kind of make it through the filters correctly. With everything going on the last year, there's been some oddities in terms of reporting data, but that's one that really stuck out, and they've addressed it. But they won't correct. They won't correct the file. They'll just add a note that says like this money this year.
So Javier, I have a question about that. So ours is, we think, abnormally high.
Okay.
And so when you say contact the state, who are you suggesting we contact?
It would, like, the folks that I typically hear this from are like the accountability folks like Mao Bang and Cindy Kazanis. I could certainly reach out to them and CC you, Matt, if that would be helpful.
Yeah, that would be helpful, because obviously the A to G grant is based on statistics, and you know, it means that we may be getting more than we should be getting. And so we want to make sure that we do all we can to make sure that we're getting the right allotment of dollars. So yeah, if you could help us by who, because you know, from what my understanding, and since I'm so new to this chair, is that, you know, once we certify with CalPADS, it's certified. And so it's not going back to CalPADS. So if there's someone else we need to go to get some, you know, the asterisk, or at least adjustment to funding or whatever, we need to do that. So.
Okay. Yeah. All right. All right, on to UC data. Do you want me to let you share?
Yeah.
All right.
Because I'm just gonna run through a few of these. So we found a few sources of like really good information that we thought we would just pass along. It's really just meant as like an FYI, as a resource if you need any of this information for things that you're working on. I'm just going to run through a few things that we found interesting, and the links are in the agenda for you to go back and look at these things as you please, because there's a lot. There's a lot on both of these resources. So I'm going to share my screen. This is the UC Information Center. This is where I guess their research department puts all of the dashboard and the data that they produce. So as you can see, just scrolling through, there are multiple dashboards on multiple topics. It's all UC related, obviously it's from UC, but ultimately there are 7 full pages of different dashboards and basically any kind of topic you could ever want to know about. So there's a lot here, and there's a lot that's very interesting. Some might not be super relevant to all of you, but it's here, peruse at your leisure. I just wanted to walk through a couple. This one looks at first year persistence and graduation rates at the 4, 5, and 6 year mark. And you can just isolate it to Tulare County. And then this brings up our Tulare County schools. It goes back really far, like 20 years for some of them. For some reason, Exeter is very limited. But so this first column is first year persistence rates, the percentage of students who, came back after their first year, and then graduation after 4, 5, and 6 years. I think we were looking at this together, trying to make sense of it, and determine that like once the graduation rate hits the same rate as the persistence rate, then it just kind of like repeats the number. Like all the students who returned finally graduated, and so like they're done. Obviously, these are blank because they haven't reached that marker yet. And then on the farthest column, you have the cohort size. Our cohorts are always fairly small, 12, 2 students from each of our schools. Again, you can isolate this to just a specific UC campus. And then on the same thing, but this is for community colleges and transfers. So if we wanted to look up our local community college, just an FYI, this filter says county. It is not by county. It is really like by the school, like city. I think COS is under Visalia. Obviously, Visalia is not a county, but here's COS. So this is for transfers from COS into the UC system as a whole. Again, these are the cohort sizes, a few dozen. This is first year persistence after, entering as a transfer and then coming back the next year, and then graduation rates at the 2, 3, and 4 year mark. So just interesting to see the outcomes for students in our areas, which is why I wanted to show this one in particular, because you can actually drill down to our students essentially. This one is similar. You can look up your own school and it'll bring up a lot of demographic information. Oh, I need to refresh. So Scroll to the side, it gives you different demographic information. Obviously, there's just gigantic pop-up that gives you other information. But if you click on one of these sites, Danube High, it zooms in the map so you can see schools in this district. And if you go to this outcomes tab, it gives you extra information related to that site. So you can see A through G completion rate, you see application rate, you see admittance rate, and you see enrollment rate across a couple of years. The limiting thing about this one is that it's only 3 years and it stops at 2018, which at this point is a long time ago, completely different world, but still interesting information to see how things have kind of trended. They do disaggregate, but very little. UC has very limited student groups for some reason. But again, you can look up your own site, just kind of see like what's here. At the bottom, it gives sort of like an average overall of these different metrics. Go back to the directory and search again. So there's that one. This one you can look up again, like our local community college. I probably need to refresh again. I've had these open for a while. I just found it very interesting. So it locates it on the map, and then all of these numbers will adjust accordingly. So you can see this is about transfers. So students from colleges and Sequoias transferred to these different sites. This is the number of students in the fall term of 2021. And you can go back different years and see how those numbers have changed. It's interesting to see how the UC site, the most popular UC site, kind of changes through the years. It's not necessarily consistent. Some years it's Berkeley, some years it's Davis, some years it's Santa Barbara. You know, it was interesting to kind of scroll through this and see that. See, here's Santa Barbara. We can also, you know, look at and numbers are fairly low, but you know, they feel that year, Davis and Berkeley, Merced, Barbara. So anyways, this I just thought was kind of interesting to look at our local community, at any community college in the state. Bubbles are sized by the population for volume, I guess. This one I found yesterday, so I'm still trying to kind of work my way through it, but basically it's looking at the gap between the share of a population of a certain student group versus the share of UC applicants, admits, and enrollees. Isolate to a specific student group. I was looking at African American students. So as you can see, there's a larger portion of you know, the overall student population that graduates high school, and then you know there's a dip in terms of applicants, admittance, and enrollees. But admits and enrollees kind of track together, so it's sort of like, you know, if they are admitted, then they tend to enroll, which I think is great. But there's this interesting dip here from 2009 to 2010. Which I'd be interested to know, you know, we were like, was there a policy change? Like what affected that dip there? Because you can also see it on the the American Indian students. Caveat, the scale only goes to 1% because it's a very small population, but still there was a big dip that same year. But again, the applicants, admits, and enrollees all kind of track together. So like if they apply, they're likely to be admitted and they're likely to enroll. but obviously very underrepresented when compared to their population size. Looking at the Asian students is interesting because it's the complete opposite. They're overrepresented at the UCs. This is their share of high school grads versus their share of enrollees in the UCs. So again, just interesting demographic information, all related to UC, and you can find that on this site, which is linked in the agenda. Then there's all this information that we found, the giant fact book from COS that has a ton of information, all different sorts of topics. I thought this one was interesting because this is looking at transfer outcomes for COS students over several years. You can see the number who went to UC, the number who went to CSU. But this line I thought was interesting that, you know, there are so many students transferring out of state from COS. I'd be curious to know where they're going. I didn't realize that that was, you know, such a large volume of students. There's more students going out of state than are going to our UCs. So just kind of interesting. This one, sort of like the UC numbers, is looking at retention rates. I would direct you to this very last column, which kind of averages out the 6-year overall. You can see the cohort number and the percentage retained, and it's broken down by gender and also by race. And obviously we can see that there's lower retention for our African American students and our Native American students. This is fall to spring. This one down here is fall to fall, so one whole year later. And obviously the numbers are lower versus, you know, did they come back semester to semester? Again, just interesting. This you can find on the CalPass Plus website, but it's this piece called Launchboard. And you can, again, look up information about our local community colleges, and there's a ton of information, all these, this is just kind of like showing you where you would click and what you would do if you got to this site. So there's all these different pieces of information. It takes you to this. You can search for different programs and sectors. You can search by different years, select any one of these different things just to get different information. I think we've linked to CalPass Plus before.
Well, again, I think it's good information to be looking at. We see in our network that we're sending a large majority of our students to our local community colleges, and we partner with them in our spaces. And so if we're seeing things or numbers looking different for particular student populations, there may be open for conversations about how we strengthen those connections and pipelines for our students. When we look at their outcomes, knowing again, if we're sending, I don't know, 70% of our graduates to our local community colleges, how do we set them up for success there so that their outcomes, so they're retained, they're able to finish their programs, either transfer or get certifications or whatever that happens to be for their path, that we are able to set supports up to make sure, like, you know, we're aware of those numbers and we want to do what we can. So again, I think it just helps us in our network spaces to think about where we may want to focus in these upcoming years. Okay, now we're on to we're just wrapping up here. Thanks for hanging in with us, guys. So we just have a couple of upcoming things. As Heather mentioned before, the data collaborative community, I mean, being a part of CORE, that's one of the great benefits, to get in rooms with districts, other districts across the state and hear what other people are doing or what they're coming up with, or letting them know what we would like to look into further. So always encourage you to attend. They're always happy to have us in the room. And the registration links are in the agenda. And is there one more? Oh, yep. And this one is just new on the horizon. I just solidified a date yesterday, so I've got to run this. This is a pretend flyer. I've got to run this by Marty. But May 19th, we're just going to do a short, like just toe dip into A through G course list. I have a list of everyone listed on the UC A through G portal who is listed as a course list manager. We're going to send some invites out to everyone. And we've invited Sarah White, who's a district counselor at Madera Unified, and also touching base with Hatching Results, who, as you guys know, is the counseling experts that we often connect with, and some of our connections at UC Merced to kind of bring to you some opportunities to help look into how your course list is doing, if there's ways that you can enhance it, just some tips and tricks, looking at outcomes for students, how you can use that as a way to prioritize equitable outcomes for all students by just maybe looking at it slightly differently. So we're going to do that. And if we get a lot of interest, you know, this may be an opportunity to do a follow-up next year. So we would invite you to come. Again, this is for any course list managers. We'll make sure all the college and career directors are on there. Any administrators or counselors that are interested, we'll get that information out. And, you know, it's an hour and a half, but we should have plenty of time for people to stay on at the end for questions. So we would love for you to come. Heather dropped the registration link in the chat. And I think that's it. I don't know if you want to say anything.
Lori,
Yes.
so we encourage our counselor folks all the time, but sometimes they don't come. So is there a way, like around the 1st of May, once this goes out, that if you need us to put pressure on our folks here, that you'll let us know who's registered and who hasn't?
Absolutely. Yeah, that would be great. That would really be helpful. So I can absolutely do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
All right. With that, guys, thank you guys so much for coming. If you guys do have any questions, please let us know. Matt, I'll follow up with you with regards to that data piece, and Alyssa will take a look too and see if there's anything we can do on our end as far as like investigating number anomaly. But
hi, this is Angelina. I have a quick question.
Sure.
On the upload progress tracker that I downloaded from the agenda, does that just show our district?
Are you talking about the core checklist?
Yes, it says upload progress tracker, and it says to make a copy for personal use. And mine just lists all of the testing sites, Tom, the works, the CalPADS files.
That should not be the.
Yeah, the last time I seen it, I had to look for my district.
Which district are you in?
Lemoore Union High School District.
Putting the link in the chat. I think you might be looking at the checklist that we provide each of you to just sort of like track your own progress as you're uploading. This is supposed to let you know like what has been received successfully and what is still outstanding from our end once we hear back from core of what files were submitted and whether they went through or not.
Okay, yeah, that's the one that I was looking for. I didn't see that one.
Yeah, so it's in the chat.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Okay.
all right, gang. Well, you guys have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday, and have a great spring break if you haven't had it yet. Hopefully nobody's like taking time off of their spring break. I know sometimes different districts have different times, but let us know if you guys have any questions questions that come up. And if you do happen to use the CCI indicator thing or any of the other tools that were kind of shared today, let us know how that goes and what it might be helpful for you guys for, or if you guys see any ways to improve any of them.
Yes.
We'd love to know. Thanks all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Good to see
Have a
you.
great day.